When I'm reading his book, it's like a parallel universe. Stephen is Bruce, and Bruce is Stephen in the different parts of the country.
So Stephen Kalish, the gentleman smuggler, you're on the border of Mexico, bringing weed over. What's that like? Are you scared? Are you nervous? Are you, thinking you're going to get arrested? Or, Bruce always felt like he was untouchable and was never scared about anything.
No, I never thought about being arrested. I mean, I've been arrested, in California, and I was an adult then, but I was careful. I was always operate on the operational side of things. And even as a young teenager, I looked for everything. And I was always a sponge when it came to absorbing everything I could.
Yeah.
So I refined the operations as we went along. Unfortunately, my partner, David Brown, was a heroin addict. He tried methadone. And so I eventually told David I couldn't do business with him. We'd gotten arrested on a trip down to Brownsville, or actually McAllen. His girlfriend was trying to mainline phenobarbital on a trip down Mexico. And I said, David, this is insane. We shouldn't have her with us. But I was still young at this time, right? So she misses her vein, abscesses, jumps out of the car off of Highway 59 in Houston, Texas. And she gets out of the car screaming and yelling, running down the highway. Well, it was moments before county sheriffs show up and arrest us for. I had told David he had a bag of phenobarbital reds. I said, David, you better eat those phenobarbitals, those reds. But there was a syringe left. So he ate all the reds, immediately overdosed. And they put us in the back of a patrol car, me and Doug, who had introduced me to David, and 105-degree heat, and they came to us and they said, better tell us what your friend ate or he's going to die. And of course, we wouldn't say anything. Of course, he lived. He charged us with possession of narcotic paraphernalia and no billed us before the grand jury.
So you didn't get busted with any drugs. You just had the paraphernalia with you?
Yeah. And none of it was mine. And we were no billed for the grand jury. And David's father had a lot of clout. So this was once again my second get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
Which I should say, I think I might mention in my book, if I had ever actually been incarcerated or actually punished for one of my crimes, I might have stopped smuggling.
Oh, interesting.
I always had great lawyers. So I have this connection in Reynosa, and I have this ideal crossing on the Rio Grande, which everybody needed. That was not something too available for a lot of people. So I was hanging out on South Padre Island, which is about 50 miles on the Mexican border. It was fairly undeveloped at the time. And I met a group of smugglers from Oaxaca, Mexico. Well, they were Americans, but they were smuggling red bud sinzamine out of Oaxaca, which was at the time some of the best marijuana you could buy. And they needed a border crossing because you couldn't really fly into Oaxaca because of the mountain ranges were too dangerous and the wind shears were bad. So I cut a deal with them and told them that I would cross their pot for 20% of their loads. So we started moving 1,000 to 1,200 pounds of high-grade marijuana from Oaxaca, Mexico, driving it all the way up through the interior, crossing it on the border, across the river, smuggling it through the checkpoints, the immigration checkpoints, and then taking it to our ranch outside of Austin, and then selling it.
And how do you make it through a checkpoint with 1,500 pounds of weed in your truck?
Well, it wasn't in a truck. We had taken these large Coleman RV campers that pop-ups, and we had hollowed out the insides and made stash compartments that could hold anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 pounds. We also took the butcher wrapper paper and the plastic wrap to wrap the marijuana so there would be no smell. And then we would hire couples, a guy and a girl, to drive through these checkpoints. And they looked like a typical tourist family. Never got pulled over once. Lost one load through a mistake of a friend of mine, but we smuggled about 25,000 pounds of Oaxaca pot. And this was in the mid 70s. And we made a lot of money.
And were you wholesaling it out, or were you diming it up and retailing it?
We were wholesaling it at $275, $300 a pound. And you were buying it for $15, $20 a pound.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Again,
yeah,
really
well,
good margins.
well, we were buying our pesos stateside because you had to pay in pesos. You didn't pay in US dollars.
Right.
And the, the, the currency exchange was very favorable at that
Yeah.
time. So we would go up in the mountains of Oaxaca and spend nights picking through different farmers' crops. Literally, we'll take this, we'll take this. We could never get 1,200 pounds of red bud. We would end up with 300 or 400 pounds of red bud Sinzamine, and maybe the rest Contamia, which was still a really high grade pot at the time. And
Yeah.
we did that, probably a couple of years until my natural order of things was meet the connections, make money with the people that introduced me with them, and then make my own connection.
Right.
And I did that my whole life, and
Yeah, starting with the Valley Girl with the first $100.
yeah, yeah. But what happened after Oaxaca was I get a call from one of my Oaxaca friends, Houston Oaxaca friends, smugglers. I wouldn't call him a smuggler. Never did anything, side finance the ops. He said he's met a group of Cubans that want to offload shrimp boats in the Gulf and wants us to find offload sites on the Texas Gulf Coast. He said, look, this is 30, 40, 50,000 pound offloads, and we can get 25% of the loads for just handling the offloads and providing the crews. And that escalated. We brought in multiple loads in the Texas Gulf Coast for the Cubans.
Stephen,
And
what
when
year was that?
1977, 78, 79.
So another similarity was in 78, Craig and I sent Craig down to Cat Island to offload a 50,000 pound load. So the loads went from, 25,000 that he had done to the similar numbers I had done to all of a sudden 50,000 pounds at a crack, or 40,000, big loads. Same year, same time, him in Texas, me in Florida.
So you guys are living these parallel lives, right, in different parts of the country,
It's
but still
uncanny,
kind of
Todd.
doing the
It's
same thing.
uncanny. It's like it was literally when, again, when I'm reading his book, it's like a parallel universe. It's like Stephen is Bruce and Bruce is Stephen in different parts of the country. The similarity, 100 little details are so exact and similar.
Yeah, and you started getting your stuff from Mexico as well, too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we got the shittier ones, the little bricks, remember, in different colored wrappers, kilos at a time.
Sorry, Bruce. It wasn't just Bruce and I. What I admire about this show, Todd, is that you all have managed to bring together smugglers from the East Coast, West Coast, Gulf Coast, and all of us were doing our own things separate and individually, right? But we were doing it in different parts of the country with different connections in Jamaica and Mexico and Colombia. I mean, the entrepreneurship of us young Americans was amazing. You know,
Yeah.
noticed. And I
And were
really,
you
yeah.
were you doing it for the money, or did you have this, need to, enlighten folks and, wanna change the world the way Bruce did?
Oh, I was all about, look, I wanted to end the war in Vietnam. And I was about, I mean, I had said many times, I'm going to get as many Americans high as I can. I mean, literally, I was committed, you know, to the Bob Dylan song, Everybody Must Get Stoned.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
Dylan or Guthrie? Oh, look, Guthrie. Anyway, there's a song,
Everybody
Everybody
must
Must Get
get
Stoned.
stoned. Yeah.
So that was, idealistically, I felt like I was doing the right thing, getting
Yeah, if
America.
everybody gets high, everybody be happy and nobody wanna fight.
Hell, we had 43 million Americans smoking pot at the time, and there was an insatiable appetite for marijuana. And very few people in the States were growing pot, so there was a huge appetite. Well, our loads increased and increased. I had eventually got connected with some Americans in Houston, Texas, who were working with a Colombian named Julio Nasser David, who's passed away and was known for as, the kingpin of gold bud from Colombia. And I had always, I knew who he was, and he had 100,000 pounds on an offshore supply vessel. And they'd come to me for the offload site, and I had a compromised offload site, which I knew was compromised. And I told them days ahead of time, I said, I think the marina manager is working with US Customs. We just lost 40,000 pounds offshore on a shrimp boat. And I said, you gotta, we gotta find another offload site.
Yeah.
And the guy running the operation said, we can't, we're out of fuel, we're out of food, we're out of water. You gotta come in. And I said, look, it's your call, but I'm not gonna have my crew here. And he said, that's okay. So I had two of my crew and myself, and it was called the Mr. Jake. And we brought in 100,000 pounds on a offshore supply vessel, and it was a bust. I was standing at the on the dock on near the bow of the offshore supply vessel, just watching the Coast Guard station a half mile away, and just keeping an eye out on things and keeping an eye out on my brother as best as I could. First stop he ever worked, last stop he ever worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, just honestly, it wasn't my idea to hire him. It was one of my good friends who worked for me pleaded with me to let my brother work for me. So
Yeah.
anyway, my brother Kyle worked for me, and I saw the op going down. I saw the cutter coming out of the Coast Guard way into the ice intercoastal waterway. I saw him push up the throttles, and I saw a helicopter coming in the distance, and I saw a trail of cars racing down this dirt road, this 2-mile dirt road. And I looked at my friend Rob, who had introduced me to these guys. I said, well, Rob, this is a bust. The place is surrounded on all sides by there's the intercoastal waterway and swampland. And there is literally, you could jump in the water, and it was 47 degrees outside, I think, at that time, December 19th. So I said, you could either jump in the water or you could try to wander through the swamps with water moccasins and alligators. And so I'm standing on the end of the dock and I'm watching the beds, getting closer and closer. And I'm slowly taking off my boots and I take my night fishing goggles, throw them in the water. And Rob goes, "What are you doing? Those are $1,000 pair of night fishing goggles." I'm going, "I'm not going to let the feds get my goggles." So I said, "My plan is to dive. I'm not surrendering." So there were 36 of us. Uh, Rob and I are standing on the edge of the dock. Uh, Federal agents are about 100 feet from us, yell, "Stop, freeze, we're going to shoot." Some nonsense. And I looked at Rob with a big smile. We both dove into the intercoastal, freezing water, and they both fired. Both the agents fired. Rob ended up diving onto some underwater pilings that broke his nose, broke both his wrists. I was grazed on my ass by a bullet, but I swam instead of into the intercoastal, try to swim away. I swam back into this marina and swam as far as I could, got some air, swam another 100 feet, and I was probably 200 sport fishermen moored at this marina. It had at the end of the dock, uh, offshore supply vessel refueling and resupply facility. So I figured the only place I could go was hide under one of the catwalks, and it's detailed in my book. And I hid under the catwalk until 2 or 3 in the morning, hanging on with half my body submerged until I knew I was going to die of hypothermia. Crawled onto one of the sport fishermen, had to break the hasp on the lock, get into the cabin, cleaned up the deck so there wasn't any mud. I had $200. I put the lock on top of $200 cash, searched the sport fisherman for 2 things: for water, food, and a place to hide. So I found Vienna sausage, a gallon of water, a saltine chips, and in the forepeak of the boat, there where the anchor was stored, I you couldn't see that you could access the forepeak from the main cabin because the way it was done was in a pegboard type with a material that you had to really look to see. If you pressed on the center of the wall, the door would pop open. So I looked in there and I thought, well, I don't know if I can get in there, but maybe. If I have to, I will. Fast forward 2 days later, they're still unloading 100,000 pounds. And I'm thinking, okay, when they finish unloading the pod, I'm going to escape from here. I don't know where everybody else is. So everybody thinks I've drowned, literally. Um, so I'm planning my escape that night. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm watching out through the curtains, and I see this guy walking down the catwalk, and there's probably 25 boats on each side of the catwalk. So 50 boats. A 1 in 50 chance that this guy walking down this catwalk is gonna climb on the boat I'm hiding on. And I said, no, I better get in this little crap space. So I climbed in this 4P, closed the door, and he gets to his boat and sees the broken lock and runs back to the U.S. Customs and DEA. And they come running back to the boat, screaming with their guns pulled, "Come on out of there. We know you're in there." Of course, I'm not saying a word. They enter the boat, and the first thing they see is the $200 with a broken hasp. One of the guys says, well, at least he had the decency to pay for damaging the boat. Now, getting into the boat, they had kicked the door open, broke it off its hinges, far more damage than I did. So they're searching the boat, and there's literally a DEA agent 6 feet away. No, 2 feet away from me, looking all around this wall, and they're opening up any places you could hide. And the fleet agent says, he's not here. He left this money. He's long gone. Well, the owner of the boat, they leave. He fires up the engines, and I'm thinking, thank God he's going to take it to another marina. He doesn't. Turns off the engines. So that night I escape. I wade to the swamp for about a mile, go to a convenience store that we'd been at 100 times when we were surfing on the Gulf Coast. Oh, one of my friends that got picked up. The owner of that load was Julio Nasser David, and it was gold bud Colombian, 100,000 pounds. So when we fast forward to 1981, 1982, 1983, with the Julio Nasser David, we had imported probably 1 million pounds of pot by this time. And on the
Wow.
West Coast, on the East Coast of Texas, then floats into Florida, North Carolina, brought a float into Cape Canaveral, which I'll never understand why we ever used that as an offload site. We were fresh off a 50,000 pound importation, partying down in the Cayman Islands. I'm ready to go back to work because I'm a federal fugitive, or soon to be, because I was convicted in the Galveston for the 100,000 pound importation. Won my first trial, convicted on the second trial, sentenced to 12 years in prison. 2 of the 3 counts were reversed on appeal, left me with a 4-year count. And they left me on an appeal bond. Judge granted me an appeal bond. And my attorney was a famous attorney named Percy Foreman in Texas. And one of his associate attorneys was Dick Karen, who is an extremely prominent defense attorney in Texas. Great guy, great friend. So anyway, I end up back in the Cayman Islands with Michael Vogel and Lee Rich. And I said, I tell Lee, I said, Paul Vargas is a great connection in Barranquilla, but I want Julio Nasser. I know you got the best pot, so I know you have a connection to him. I know you hadn't worked with him in a while. Just call him up and ask him if he'll meet with me. And he calls him up, sets up a meet in San Andres, Colombia, which is an island off the coast of Nicaragua that's sovereign territory of Colombia. Well, of course, Lee doesn't want to fly with me, and Michael doesn't want to fly with me, and Julio and his lieutenants, they've been indicted out of Miami on, multiple counts for, CCE and other stuff. So we meet on this island. I get down there and I'm thinking, okay, well, we'll, do another 50, 60, 70,000 pound shrimp boat load. And I sit down with Julio at this resort. Beautiful. I said, look, I got to clear the air. I'm responsible for the 100,000 pounds he lost in Freeport, Texas. And now on a side note, out of 36 defendants in that case, not a single one cooperated with the government. History in the United States. So anyway, Julio Nasser he goes, look, that's past history. I could care less. He goes, what do you want to do? And I go, I want to smuggle gold by Colombian into the United States. I said, we got shrimp boats, offload sites. He goes, well, I have a tug and barge, Santa Domingo. How much power you want to smuggle? I said 50 to 75,000. He goes, no. He said, how about 300,000? I'm like, look, Julio, I got two partners. I go, they're going to think I'm crazy if I come back, tell them, you want to offload 300,000 pounds in one night. He goes, well, it doesn't have to be one night. And I go, all right, well, okay, I'm all for it. The more the merrier for me.
Sure.
Where the title of where Lee Rich's book comes in, Bruce, In Too Deep. So my partner is Lee Rich. So we wrote a book years ago called In Too Deep. When I flew back to the Cayman Islands, Julio Nassau wanted to do a 300,000 pound importation. They said I was crazy. It's a $10 deposit on 300,000 pounds, which was 30 million bucks. No,
3 million.
3 million was all we had to put up. And then another $1 million for the offload site, which I didn't
And
have.
you're making lots of money at this point. So $3 million is nothing, or that's a lot of money.
The whole idea is to not spend your own money.
Yeah.
We had our investors were making 4-to-1 on their investments. So, we raised 7 million or something from our investors, offering them
And
up.
how do you pitch? How do you pitch an investor? Hey, I'm going to go pick up 300,000 pounds of weed. I just need $3 million.
We tell them if you put up $500,000, we'll pay you back 2 million.
And
Yeah.
and I want to chime in here because I did the same exact thing, but 3-to-1, not 4-to-1. All right, and a lot of it's your distributors. The people that you've made millions of dollars for.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
assume that Steve was the same thing. He tapped his distributors that he had fronted pot to earlier.
Yes, that's entirely correct. A lot of it was people that had made millions from selling our pot, and they were glad to invest. And that way we didn't have to we only had to put in $1 million a piece or 2 million a piece. So anyway, I had to find an offload spot for 300,000 pounds, which is not a easy thing to do. So I found a shipyard in southern Louisiana, which was perfect it was just the ideal offload spot.
I want to interject
Yeah.
right here. Todd's always wants to say, let's end this episode with a cliffhanger. Okay. So, Todd, here's my personal suggestion this is the cliffhanger. Steve can tell how the largest smuggle in the history of the United States, which is 300,000 pounds, occurred if everybody tunes into next episode. What do you think?
Yes. So, Stephen, you'll come back and finish the story for us?
Oh, yeah. And that can transition into the problems we had with all the money in the Cayman Islands and me going to Panama. And that's where I meet Noriega and set up operations in Panama.
Well, that is a really good cliffhanger for next week where you meet Noriega and, then bring in this 300,000 pounds. So we will see everybody next week. Make sure you tune in because Stephen Kalish, who is the gentleman smuggler, he's going to finish this story about his history as one of the biggest marijuana smugglers of all time, and then how he connected with the King of Pot, Bruce Perlowin, in prison. And in the meantime, I'm Todd Dankin. He's Bruce Perlowin, and Steve Kalish, the gentleman smuggler, will be back next week right here on Becoming the King of Pot.